It's Tuesday, the 17th of February, 2015. My name is Robin Yellow. This is Ecotastic, and with me, as always, is Il Professore, Kit Knowles.
I'm not going to get used to that, but hello, everybody.
How was Italy? No, you haven't been to Italy, have
I
you?
haven't, no. I have not been to Italy or any other foreign country for some time, although, key to the show, I am off to ski next week. Tut, tut.
Italy. Tell me it's Italy.
No, it's Austria.
Well, that's close enough.
It's close enough. Yeah, Il
So you have
Professore is
no
good.
connection to Italy at all. I'm still going to call you Il Professore, though.
Okay, all right, no worries.
Okay, good.
Um,
Shall we start with the news?
I think we should. Yeah, I think
we
that would be
should too.
lovely.
I think we should too. Okay, first up from Engineer Live this week. This article actually was shared by one of our viewers. Record-breaking January for UK wind energy. The National Grid has reported that for the first time since records began, January was the most productive month ever for wind energy, providing 14% of Britain's electricity, which is 4.13 terawatt hours. Wow. Enough to power the equivalent of 8.7 million UK homes. The weekly record was also broken in January with 1.119 gigawatt hours generated, and the
Big numbers.
half-hourly, I'm bored with stats, but anyway, fantastic, 14% of Britain's electricity. That's a hell of a lot of windmills, Kit.
Seriously, that's quite impressive because obviously last time I checked, we had something like 3% of our electricity being provided by renewables. So to bump up to 14%, even temporarily, that's fairly impressive.
3%, you say?
3 to 5%, depending on which statistics you use. I can't remember what the Office of National Statistics said it was. Didn't we have one of those statistics in our last week's summary from those fellows at .gov.uk? But I think
Indeed,
it
we
was
did.
around that.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I can't recall the figures exactly, but it certainly wasn't.
It wasn't
Could be great.
14%. Yeah.
Well, certainly we've got a lot of catching up to do when it comes to comparing the UK with Spain and with Germany when it comes to renewables, but still 14%, excellent performance.
Excellent. Yeah, really promising, and obviously we need to keep on topping that up, I think.
And talking of renewables, the BBC News website reports this week of a Scots Hydro scheme, first for green investment funding. The Vince Cable, the business secretary, has reported, has announced a £60 million fund for green initiatives led by the UK Green Investment Bank, and this Scottish Hydro scheme was the first to benefit from it. There are 30 projects that will get a share of this money. The idea is to kickstart projects of under 2 megawatt systems, which will generate enough energy for 1,900 homes. Isn't it funny how energy, whenever it's reported, is always reported in terms of the number of homes it would heat?
Yeah, I guess it's slightly more relatable, but not particularly. But actually, it's funny. This is a really poignant story for me because last week, I've actually just shared a link with you there, Robin. But last week, I was looking for green investment opportunities, and both personally and for clients. And one of the schemes I came across was exactly this, where you basically have somebody forming a cooperative, a group of people in Stockport, in this case, have formed a cooperative. They got some funding through raising money from private investors and other sources, and then actually built themselves a hydro scheme after they got all the planning and everything together. And then cooperatively, people are investing in this. And I did, I think it was last year or the year before, I invested in a scheme for Manchester Tree Station, which is a fantastic project. I might have mentioned it before, where we're clearing up all of the agricultural waste. That's any trees coming out of parklands or avenues in gardens in urban areas. It would normally all go to landfill. And these guys are converting it into furniture. They're then converting it into fuels and delivering it to fuel poor, as well as paying customers, which is a fantastic way of doing it. But it's also a scheme which you can invest in and become a member of the cooperative. But what's really exciting about these small schemes is that they are all certified for the EIS scheme. So if you, like me, are a taxpayer and you have paid tax on a number of things in the past, I don't know if it's in investments, I think it can go back for 3 years. I'm not sure which portion it's paid on. It might be on the capital gains of any accrual of any investment. Then you can get 30% of the value of your investment in any of these cooperative schemes, and reclaim that off the capital gains bill, I believe. So forgive me if I got any of those statistics wrong, but I know it's 30%.
Big screw there, Kit?
Yeah, those are this is the kind of there's obviously several different ways to get energy out of water, but these screws are effectively being turned by the water as it comes down. And it's a very,
so it sort of comes round here into the building. This little kind of looks like a little building which has got these two enormous green screws. I mean, they look about 3 or 4 meters long.
Yeah, they're hefty. They're hefty fellas. But what's going on there is it's funneling the water against them. And you can imagine, like an old school water wheel, you only get kind of one shot, or even not even one shot, one part of a revolution out of that wheel before the water molecule has hit it and then disappeared off the other end. In this case, what's happening is the water molecule stays in contact, applying force against that screw for many rotations before it comes off the end. So it's a much more efficient way of deriving energy. There are some downsides to these kind of helical screw systems associated with maintenance and whatnot, but they are very, very efficient.
Well, I was going to ask about that actually. I mean, with any machine that's got moving parts like this does, there's going to be a cost of maintenance. You know, how much of the actual money that's put into it goes on to keeping it running?
I don't know the exact statistics on that, but it is a very small percentage. I mean, the reality is that scheme, I think, is earning £60,000 a year from selling the electricity and from government feed-in tariffs. So it's fairly lucrative. These guys, I think, only raised about 1/3 of the funding for it, and they're 1 year into it. So you can imagine what sort of loans are hanging over the head of this, but they're still managing to pay investors 4% interest even after 1 year. So they're definitely doing quite well out of it. Presumably maintenance will start to crank up after a few years, but helical screws are sensitive to the size of debris being brought with it down the river, so sticks and the like. So you need to be constantly on cleaning screens and grills, and there are really interesting alternatives. I think we showed one several way back in Ecotastic history, where we were looking at a vortex hydro-powered system,
yes,
which gets over a lot of those issues, but still gets the continuous sort of efficiency that you get from multiple revolutions, and that was a vortex that it was forming. But anyway, the long and the short of it is, if you're an investor, you've got some spare cash, there is really fantastic schemes, you know, nationally, which come under this EIS scheme. So you can invest, get a moderate return, relatively safe return in a lot of cases, but the most important thing being that you can get 30% of all the money you push into it straight back off your next tax bill. And that can also go back over 3 years, so that you can accumulate quite a hefty amount. I think most of these schemes have a maximum investment of £20,000, but I believe you can invest in more than one. So you could really reclaim a lot in terms of, and do a lot of good at the same time. So divest from petroleum, invest in renewables.
And of course, every kilowatt hour that comes out of this system is another kilowatt hour that doesn't have to come from hydrocarbons.
That's it.
Now, you're off skiing next week, Kit. Alpine ski resorts are gaining a boost from going green, apparently, in recognition of its pioneering environmental work. Villars in Switzerland has become the first ski resort, one of 3 resorts in the Alps, to be awarded the Flocon Vert. The Green Snowflake, a sustainable certifying label run by Mountain Riders, a French group that campaigns for a more sustainable winter sports industry. Now, you get an impression of healthy living and skiing under your own power down the side of a mountain. Skiing holidays are super green, aren't they, Kit?
No, not even close. I mean, not to mention the flights that we have to take to get there, and the incredibly long haul bus journeys or private vehicles taking us up to these sort of 3,000-meter resorts. And for those of us who are staying in Courchevel or Meribel, you know, we have our private helicopter landing pads, obviously, that we just pop in on, and we've come out with our big fluffy Russian furs, beautiful stuff. And then what we do is we expect all our food and drink, and we consume a huge amount of food and drink on a skiing holiday. We expect that to be brought up to 3,000 meters. What we're doing is we're taking an incredibly inhospitable area, and we are turning it into the height of civilization with just about every luxury imaginable. So it's one of the only times you find that British people taking regular saunas, jacuzzis, all these energy intensive elements. I go every night. I'll be going out. You go bowling, you go to dances, you go and you know, it's a full-on social environment. It's like being in the centre of Manchester or London or whatever, but at the top of a flipping mountain at 3,000 meters. They have everything's there available for you. So the amount of energy that it takes to hoist stuff up and take stuff down is scary. Now, some of the resorts are using renewables to power them, which obviously incredibly helps, but actually what you're doing is still putting all the energy up there and not providing it to the bulk of civilization at the bottom of the hill, which would be perfectly feasible. So they have these massive hydro installments in France, in La Trois Vallées, the Three Valleys, and sort of Val d'Isère and those sorts of areas are benefiting from these incredible hydro systems, which does make them greener. But as I said, it's not, because you're just offsetting it. You're just using it there instead of at the bottom of the mountain. And what everybody is forgetting with these eco-powered systems is that you still have to get all the construction materials up to build an entire civilization at the top of a mountain. It is frightfully intensive in terms of energy.
So if it's so bad, why are you going?
Well, that is a very difficult question to answer. Let's just say I'm sure we're all hypocrites in one way or another.
Well, I know I definitely am. Moving on. Architects Journal this week reported a chance to silver plan for an Ecohome cluster in London. The 238-metre square scheme in Forest Hill, known as Elo Vale, features a trio of two-bed houses built round a shared courtyard. According to the design team, the buildings are highly insulated, triple glazed, feature an exhaust air heat pump connected to solar and photovoltaic panels, and a wood-burning stove to top up the heating in winter. Now, what's so great about these cluster homes, Kit?
Okay, so the cluster, this idea of putting them all together, obviously the estate agents are going to gawp at this because they can't make quite as much money as they would if they had 3 semi-Ds. And Barratt Homes, I think, is literally, their designers are just terrible. They will take a site and they will make these tiny little homes on them, and they will squeeze hundreds of these on a patch of land, but they will all be as detached as possible to drive up those house prices. They simply make more money. It's a very.
What is it that we love about detached houses,
I've
Kit?
no idea. I would much rather have a bigger portion of my facade covered, so you're in a situation where you don't need to maintain it. You've got less likely maintenance related issues occurring, but most importantly, the surface area to volume ratio of those 3 dwellings combined is hugely reduced in comparison to
just to describe what's on the screen here. This is clearly some kind of infill building that's surrounded by other buildings in the area. It's 3 townhouses connected together, so it's what we call a townhouse or terrace cluster. It's clearly got some kind of flat roof situation, and the 3 occupants or 3 families are living cheek by jowl with a shared garden area. So very tight, very compact.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the single biggest issue in terms of proximity is obviously the acoustic side of things. But the other thing you'll note about this, I mean, there's a fair few issues I'd have with this design. Firstly, they're using exhaust air heat pump to drive the properties. Now, they're using a form of passive ventilation. For those of you who can't see the screen, Robin's showing at the moment a cross section with blue arrows, which represents infiltrating air, and red arrows representing the exfiltrating air. And what you'll see at the top there, these big opening lights at the top of the dwelling, which they'll then be using to control the rates of flows of energy through that property. And presumably that's where they'll be mounting the heat pump to capture the warmest possible outlet before it's escaping. And it's quite commonly used, but my issue with this is that, of course, all this infiltration requires vents direct to the outside, all of which are very difficult to make them work together, to make them balance, so the same amount of air being extracted relates to the same amount of air being brought in. And of course, all the areas where the infiltration is coming in, you've got these very cold, very moist air being brought in at those living spaces, and as you can tell, they're all windows. So what you quite often find is that where you're bringing infiltration in where windows are, you get quite a lot of condensation, because you get a localized cooling effect. But the entire front of the building is glazed. Now, I think they're representing the solar gains coming from the back. There was some little yellow arrows on that cross section, so presumably south is at the rear, but you can't be quite so clear. But that means your entire north facade is glazed. Now, if you took a passive house wall, which they're probably not that good, and you took a passive house window, and they're probably not that good either, then you're looking at about 6 to 8 times better performance of the wall per square meter than a window. So to cover your entire north face, which never sees the sun, in extremely poor performing glazing, poor performing relative to a wall, even if it's high performing glazing, it is poor performing in terms of building fabric. It's absolutely crazy, I'm afraid. So I doubt that's going to be a fantastically ecosystem.
Well, that remains to be seen. Maybe we can take a field trip there and take some video.
Oh, that would be exciting.
Ecotastic's maybe when you
first field trip.
When you get back from your skiing holiday. Now, let's talk about flat roofs. Now, I have a flat roof, and in the pre-show you were mocking me mercilessly about it.
I would never do such a thing.
Well, listeners, he certainly was. He was whispering under his breath in that kind of you're an idiot way. Now, flat roofs are very popular in the UK, and of course they're notoriously difficult to keep dry and to do well. And even though we've got a lot of modern materials that have sort of emerged in the last 15 or 20 years, it's still always a worry that your flat roof is going to leak. Not only that, of course, you've got the problem of insulation. Flat roofs, if they're not done well, can be very cold, which will let your expensive heat out in the winter and let too much heat in the summer. Now, you've been doing some design work, I think, recently that you're going to share with us, Kit, on flat roofs?
Yes, yeah, sure. If you flip over to that document I shared with you, what you'll see is that a very common issue with folks in the UK is they want themselves a lovely extension at the rear to give themselves a better flow through the property, bigger kitchen, all these exciting ideas. But what they're restricted by always is this first floor window in their existing property. It really restricts the kind of height that's available to them.
So describe briefly, Kit, if you could, what's on the screen.
Right. Well, we're going to walk through a couple of ideas. There's quite a few solutions to this. I just sort of grabbed some architectural concepts that were just simple solutions to the problem. But I was also doing it for a specific case where this guy had a design done for him. He asked for a box on the back of his house, and he got a box on the back of his house with a lovely flat roof, GRP and all the rest of it that was being proposed. And I
What's GRP?
Glass reinforced plastic. These are a fibrous roof, which is, out of all of the flat roofing materials, probably the most durable, has certainly the longest warranties, and for me, it's if a flat roof goes in and it's watertight immediately, within the first sort of 12 months, 24 months, then it will likely stay that way for a good period of time, maybe 20 years. But a huge portion of them will leak on installation because they're also very difficult to get watertight from the off, because you're basically asking water to pool. You have to create a completely watertight structure under the weight of and pressure, hydrostatic pressure of pooling water. So what you find is that a lot of them fail on the off, and GRP, I find, is the one that's most successfully installed. So you're most likely to actually use its warranted life, which is again about 25 years. So none of these are that long lasting when you put them into perspective of traditional roofs. So sort of the clay terracottas, those clay tiles, or the slates, they're lasting between 100 and 150 years. So much longer lasting.
Well, you said actually on a few Ecotastics ago that we should be building houses that last 100 years. What of the design that you've got here, which just to describe that is a regular two-story house, and it looks like instead of putting a flat roof extension on the ground floor, you've actually got a slope which continues the line of the roof down with glass panels in it. Why would that last 100 years?
Well, because the bulk of what we can make that roof structure out now can return to the traditional building techniques, all of which that are simple to go in, that are proven, and that by definition have the kind of belt and braces of the weatherproofing external tile, and then a membrane underlay underneath, and critically the whole fabric can retain breathability, which is my biggest limiting factor when it comes to flat roofs. And you spoke about the difficulty of incorporating insulation in flat roofs. For me, one of the difficulties is that by definition, to maintain a completely hermetic seal, you need to make it completely non-breathable. And so in terms of breathability, by making it non-breathable, you have to start to allow for cavities sometimes and all sorts of bits and bobs. So it's expensive, it's poor performing, it's not durable, and the solution that we were showing just at the top there was this two-story height system where you're continuing the pitch coming down. Now the beauty of this is that that increased height of space means that you can increase the quantity of glazing in there, because most people like a highly glazed modern rear extension, and that normally turns into an absolute nightmare, because highly glazed means big temperature swings, big changes in temperature going on there, particularly with regards to overheating potential. So then people end up putting in air conditioning and the whole thing spirals into an energy nightmare. But what you can do with this sort of double height space is, because the heat rises, you can actually keep the head zone relatively cool in hotter temperatures. So you can benefit from increased glazing, which means you can benefit from increased solar gains during the sort of spring and autumn months. And what you can do as well is...
Are you actually venting, just to interrupt you here for a sec, Kit, are you actually venting in the summer out of the top here?
That what you're looking at there is just an architectural detail. That's a secret gutter, so that it's a very clean line system. Right. But yes, it is actually recommended that you do incorporate some sort of ventilation there if you wanted to use some automated control. But bear in mind, every time you put ventilation in the optimal place for keeping you cool, you also suffer from any potential leakage at that point during the winter, where it can keep you much cooler than you'd expect also. But the beauty of this system is that it's incorporating now the first floor windows, which means there's no restriction anymore as to the pitch that's available to you. And also you can open those windows and benefit from all this rising heat that you're gathering in that area when you want it, and when you don't, you can shut them out. But additionally, we can mount like a wood burning stove in there, where we can then use those incidental gains from a relatively carbon neutral source to also heat, and we can spread that much further around the house by again sort of opening those windows and allowing some manual ventilation into those rooms above.
Okay, let's move on. You've got this twin monopitch. I don't even know what's going on there, but that looks really expensive.
It's actually not any more expensive than if you were to go for sort of flat roof systems, on the basis that again you can maintain the pitch deep enough to allow for traditional roofs.
It's just bringing light in as well.
That middle section, that celestial window is very powerful at bringing light into very deep into the system, which of course everybody in the flat roof world has to resort to these horrifically expensive, horrifically poor performing lanterns. Lanterns are the devil when it comes to performance, and these celestial windows can be you can actually incorporate traditional style off the shelf CAD/CAM built high performance windows. So we recommend sort of the timber frame systems, and they can just slot in there, so you're using traditional roofing techniques and advanced modern windows with top performance, so you can easily make that design kind of passive house performing.
And just to finish that off, you've got a hipped extension here, a duo pitch. So you're just
Yeah,
putting slanted roofs on the extension rather than a flat roof, which allows...
Yeah, just some alternatives, exactly. And if you see at the one on the left at the bottom screen there, you'll actually see that the gable end has been brought forward in front of the window beneath, and then they've allowed for a Juliet balcony, or you can allow for a proper balcony at the back. Now, that means that you've still got flat roof, granted, but it is still better to have the vast bulk of your extension as a pitched, as a duo pitched or mono pitched system, and then just have this very small cutout to enable the light and the accessibility of that window or door. Now, in the case of a Juliet balcony, on the main house. So you can see there how that's quite an interesting solution.
Fantastic.
And then if you scroll down, there's just one other interesting cutout. Sorry, a little bit further.
A little bit further.
And further still, that's just a reverse mono pitch there. Right, here's another interesting solution where, again, just the idea of using a kind of a hybrid where you've got a little bit of flat roof but you're minimizing it, where you actually cut into the mono pitch and flash around the base of those existing windows on the first floor.
I must admit, I do love this. I think it's fantastic because you've got that extra space, you've got that extra feeling of height, and as you say, you're building something which is more durable, therefore it's more sustainable. Therefore, it's better for the environment. And on that fantastic note, that high note, that looks great. That's the end of Kit's Tech Corner. Was that a Tech Corner, or was that what?
I think it definitely was. That absolutely constitutes as not the news, just some hardcore passive design advice.
Indeed, and we segued into Kit's Tech Corner without me announcing it. That's the only thing I have to do on this show. And I got that wrong, so apologies. As always, you can submit stories to our subreddit, which is ecotastic.reddit.com. We have you can subscribe to us on the podcast on feedburner.com/ecotasticpodcast, or our YouTube channel Ecotastic, not to be confused with Egotastic, which is German porn. Kit, thank you so much for this week, for your contribution.
A little bit too hard there, haven't you, Robin?
I'm bitter about it. We didn't really think, we were so excited to actually get the show going that we just went, Ecotastic, brilliant, and then just everything followed from that, not realizing that I just spent 10 minutes researching Ecotastic searches in YouTube, you'd realize what happens. It's actually really difficult. In fact, when you put Ecotastic into YouTube, it says, I assume you meant Egotastic, and you get the German porn. What are you going to do? And no show next week, Kit. Unfortunately, you're off skiing.
Yes, that's it. So it's going to be the week after.
I'm off in Hull on business, so it's from the sublime to the ridiculous, skiing at one end, Hull at the other. I won't tell you which end is sublime. But Kit, good show, and I'll talk to you again in 2 weeks. That's all from us tonight, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Cheers. See you then.